Welcome to Running in the 70s, where we interview, meet, and get to know athletes of all kind who were running in the 70s. I'm your host, Matthew Kleinowski. Today on the podcast, we're in Tennessee with the 24th member of the Ultrarunning Hall of Fame. He's a legend. He's got a lot of names and nicknames. One of my favorite is, some people call him the Da Vinci of pain, but he is not all just about pain. He's about inspiration and a long career, giant impact on the sport of running and ultra running. Today, welcome on the podcast, Lazarus Lake. Good morning, Gary.
Good morning. I hardly recognize the introduction. We don't deal in pain here, but there may be some discomfort involved.
Let's talk about your origin story, growing up, and the role of how the world has changed, just a glimpse from then, and how you got into running.
Oh, man, that's a lot of territory. I got into running because of a newscast on TV back in 1966, and they had showed a family in Texas doing something they called jogging. When I look back on things, it was the first running craze. Lots of people started doing a small amount of this jogging every day. My dad and some of his friends would go to the high school track and do a mile. And I went and did a mile. It was the first time I could beat him at something. So in my mind, I must be a runner. Unfortunately, my dad was probably one of the few runners slower than me.
Were you competitive as a kid?
I think there's a competitive gene that runs in our family. I've got it. My dad definitely had it. My son has it. And his younger daughter seems to show the same kind of thing. Matter of fact, the Beans, I think she's 6. Hard to keep track of grandkids. They change really fast. But we're already worried because the driver's license thing, they have points with your driver's license. She likes to score points. I'm thinking this approach is not going to have the desired outcome.
Yeah, that's the wrong incentive for her.
She may go for the record.
This track you went to, it wasn't an artificial track. We didn't have those very much. Or you were running on, was it a school cinder track?
It was a school track, but Tullahoma was really advanced. They had a asphalt track. And by the time I was in high school, it was rubberized. It wasn't like what today, but it was the first rubberized track I ever saw. It looked more like they'd taken chopped up tires that were diced into tiny pieces and made a surface out of them.
Did you compete in running?
Just had one race in junior high school. When I started high school, I went out for cross country and then, of course, track. As a sophomore, I was 5 feet tall and 70 pounds at the start of the year. And you can run down your list of sports. The options are cross country and track.
What was the state of those? Taking advantage of the sports that were there for your body size and type. What was the rest of the world thinking about cross country then? What was the status?
Well, I don't know. We had a really good cross country team and track team and a really good coach. Within the people who ran, it was considered we were part of the track and cross country world. At least as it developed, you had a lot of schools where they said, oh, we're going to have a team. Here it is. One of our football assistant coaches can go out there and he said, the race 2 miles. So for training, every day we'll run 2 miles. The kids will run until they're just out of sight of the coach and wait for 20 minutes and then run back. And serious kids will do their own training. but we had a serious coach and a serious program, and we always did well. Tullahoma was at that time the smallest school in the state with a cross country team, but we were in the state meet every year, finished as high as third while I was there.
What did you think about what would happen to you after high school? What was your plans for going to college? You said you were a runner. How integrated was running in your life? What was life going to look like after high school for you?
I was hoping to avoid prison. I didn't. When I first got done with school and finished running, then that seemed like kind of the end of running because I wasn't particularly good. So there was a period of time during which I didn't really run. And then I started thinking I wanted to, you watch the documentaries and stuff. What was it called? The Olympiad, the ones from like 1968.
Yeah.
And you get in your head, maybe I could win the Olympic marathon. So I started running again. And I lived in Memphis. I had run a few races and a little stuff in between, but when I lived in Memphis, I got to training all the time and thinking I had big goals, but I'm not a gifted athlete.
Well, what was going on in the sport there? You talked about maybe that first running craze starting when you were a kid. Then what had changed by the time that you set the Olympics hit your brain and you thought about goals and running shoes and things like that? What was going on?
This was in the early 70s. I bought my first pair of actual running shoes in Memphis that weren't track or cross country shoes, the ones with no heel and the spike holes that you put your spikes in and out so that you feel like a runner. Everything needs to have its gear. There was one road race a year in Memphis then. They had a 5-mile race at Overton Park in the spring. I ran that. I ran into a guy. I saw another person running one day. I saw him cross the road up in front of me, and I thought, he's running. He's intentionally running. So I kicked it into high gear, and I got to the turn inside in time to see him make his next turn. And then I narrowed the gap because I was trying to catch him and caught up to him as a guy named Arnold Weiner, who, since I've left Memphis, I don't know what became of him. I tried to look that name up on Facebook, but I can't find people. So it was a guy named Arnold Weiner. He was running, and he told me there's a runners club in Memphis that running is exploding. It's a running boom. So I joined the Memphis Runners. I believe I was member number 12. I think they've grown way beyond that now.
Yeah.
The Memphis Runners had races. We had races we ran pretty much every week. We all met at a parking lot at Memphis State. We talk about which of the courses that went from there that we wanted to run that day. Then start a stopwatch and toss it under a bush. And the first person back pulled out the stopwatch and called out everybody's times as they came in. So the only real volunteer was a winner. And afterwards, the entire Memphis Runners Club could go to a bar and drink beer.
Nice. Yeah. Do you remember the first time you had to pay? And what'd you think about that?
The 5-miler had an entry fee. It seems like it might have been as much as, I don't remember what it was for sure. Well, my mind was to say $5, but $5 was a lot then. The all-comers track meets in the summer would cost $0.25.
That's great. Okay, by the late 70s, you were thinking of running even farther than a marathon. When did the ultra running longer than marathon idea come for you?
I did my first runs longer than a marathon, like in 1976, 77, 78, because I wanted the last stretch of the marathon not to be the furthest I'd ever run. So if you could do 30 milers, it would improve. But I had not really conceived of running an ultra until it became plainly apparent I wasn't even going to be good at a marathon. So then I started thinking the ultra marathon must be it. Look at your assets and you say, well, I'm always in good shape and I can tolerate a lot of abuse. Unfortunately, all the people who move up in distance have exactly the same attributes, except they're a little faster than me. Well, really, I moved up in distance repeatedly until you ran out of distance to move up. But relative to the rest of the field, I was always in pretty much the same place.
Hmm. Do you remember, were there women part of your Memphis running club in the earliest days?
No, there were with 12 people, there were no female runners. Female runners were not very common. I was raised in the thing where the woman didn't run beyond, 3,000 meters?
Yeah.
And hell, we didn't even run meters. We only ran yards and miles and portions of miles. When the first woman ran the marathon and Jack Semple in the Boston, and Jack Semple tried to pull her off, I guess I would have been more inclined to support him than her.
Yeah.
You just didn't encounter female runners. When I was a senior, there were a couple of schools in the state, maybe 2 or 3 that were, I don't think they were really progressive so much as they had a parent who didn't have sons, and they
Right.
started girls track programs. That just began. It didn't take a long time to figure out that, yeah, women can run, but I'll never get beat by one.
That's great. All
So
right.
they
So there
say
weren't.
it was a
Go ahead.
shock first time I was chicked, and now it's routine to get grannied.
That's great. All right. Let's talk about the origin of the first race that you organized. You said there weren't enough ultra marathons in 1979.
No, we really started organizing it in 78.
Ah,
And because you don't just walk out and hold a race one day. I decided I wanted to run an ultra. There had been one in Atlanta when I wrote the ATC 50. And when I wrote to them, they wrote back and said there were only 4 entrants last year, so it was discontinued.
wow.
And then I found there was ultras in New York City and Miami. And you just think, yeah, no, the only way I can possibly go to one is to hold one here. So that was how the Strolling Jim got started. I tacked together some of my favorite training terrain that was purposely hilly, thinking I'm aware I'm not fast at any distance, but if it's hilly, it'll bring everybody back.
And let's talk about the name, Strolling Jim. What was the inspiration to pick that?
It was the first champion walking horse. There was a name that had strong local ties. The race started in a Wart race, and Strolling Jim was Wart race's claim to fame at that time. So you wanted to pick a name that gave it a local connection and would increase the odds of getting help in putting together an event.
Honestly, before I heard of this race, I didn't know what a champion walking horse was. What's that about?
Yeah, they have show horses. and they walk with an abnormal stride. But it was a big thing here. I think it's really receded in interest from what it once was. And there's a lot to the story, and I hate to delve into it unless I was an expert. Show horses
Yeah.
aren't always treated the best.
Oh. Who was involved and what happened from 78 to the beginning of the race? What did it take and how did you communicate and who showed up?
There was another runner where I was. I'd gone from being the only runner in the county to there's a guy named John Anderson who lived in Bell Buckle and ran. Later on, I would meet Henry Hewlin, who ran. Those were a couple of guys I did a lot of miles with in those early days, especially me and Henry. Then you had to really figure out what you were going to do from scratch. You approach it like you plan anything. You say, okay, we have to start. What do we need to start? We have to have a course. What do we need to do to have a course? Do we need traffic control at some point along the way? It was really rural then. We may have had traffic control at the highway crossing in the first years, but by today's standards, it wouldn't have been necessary. It was a lightly traveled 2-lane highway. Most of the roads were gravel and out in the country. There weren't bridges across, but some of the streams. So if the water was flowing, you were going to get your feet wet. And you had to find a field. Of course, you didn't have social media of any kind. So I went to marathons that I ran in over the year before the race, and I made up a big cardboard sign and it said ultra marathoner. And then had a little copied piece of paper that said about the race I was going to have. And then I carried a stack of flyers with me and walk around wherever you had your pre-race meeting for the marathon. And whoever came over, I gave them a sheet. I believe we had 22 entrants the first year. It's on the run sign-up listing for the race. We've got all the results from all the years. I remember there were only 3 people who had ever run an ultra marathon before out of the 22. And I believe that 2 of the 3 had only run a 50K. And the other one was someone who had actually run some distance, like a 50 miler.
Mhm.
It was an adventure for everybody.
How did you settle on the distance?
The common thing for races back then, the entire course measurement thing had not really come into vogue. Matter of fact, Pete Regal, one of the guys that used to run in the early strolling gyms, was among the people. He was an engineer, so he had that kind of mindset. And among the people that constructed methods for measuring courses outside of a track, an exact distance you didn't think about unless you were running on a track. So the road races that I ran that were scattered here and there, they were traditional races. They were all picked for the course. I can't remember the Red Bank 8.4 down outside of Chattanooga and the Old Hickory 11.2. They measured them. You didn't really put great credence in the measurements. So the Strolling Jim was strung together a bunch of my favorite running courses, really pretty countryside and challenging climbs and descents and different kinds of terrain. I was shooting for something between 40 and 50 miles. It came out at 41.2, which it's probably still really close, although there's been a lot of changes since then. There's not any real gravel anymore.
Huh. Did you run the course before the race?
Not intact. The race was the first time I did 40 miles.
Huh.
In the approach, I had a minor injury over the winter. My training was way down and I was really only just getting back going when the race was held, but I ran it anyway because wasn't going to wait another year to run an ultra. And I thought I could survive. And that was pretty much all I did was survive because I wasn't in the kind of condition I would have preferred to been in.
And what were the results? 22 people started.
Yeah, we had 22 start. I want to say 21 finished.
Really?
Since the beginning of the Strolling Jim, with thousands and thousands of people who have run it, at last I looked, the finishing percentage for the whole time is between 94 and 95%.
Wow. Yes. Okay, let's talk about what else was going on there. You just finished the first Strolling Jim as a race organizer. And what'd you think when it was done? Success? Was it going to last? What were you thinking of yourself now as this race organizer?
When you're young, you don't perceive that the future is finite. I just assumed it would go on, would hoped it would. It was another running boom.
Yeah.
I was just getting into ultras and found it was the ultra running boom. Ultras are exploding. I found Nick Marshall and got the ultra distance summary where that Nick Marshall covered all of the ultras held in America for the year in a couple of mimeograph pages, and became one of that exploding group of people. I remember the issue that was really concerning the ultra community at that time was what happens when there's so many people running ultras that you don't know everybody. I don't mean locally, I mean from coast to coast, the entire country. Because if you didn't know somebody, one of your friends knew them. The summary came out, you read it to see all the people who finished ultras that year. When Ultrarunning Magazine started in 1980, they put the results from every race was in the magazine. And you read all the list of finishers because at first you knew most of them. But it was growing. It grew out of the point where that people knew everybody.
Yeah. You run hundreds of articles for Ultrarunning Magazine. When did you start writing? Were you writing before you decided to write for the magazine?
Not really. I've compulsively written stuff down all of my life. But what you did before the computer was, I just kept a lot of scratch paper. I'd have a pile of flyers with blank backs. And I wrote stuff, whatever I wanted to write, just because. And then I'd throw it in a box. And when the box filled up, I took it and threw it away.
Yeah,
And
lost to running history.
And I also am a compulsive reader. And my subscription budget was already pushed past the limit. And here's a new magazine about running. And the only way I could think of to get that added was to write them and say, if I write an article every month, could I get a free magazine?
Yeah. Wow. What name did you use on the articles?
Oh, Gary Cantrell.
Okay. Yeah.
Lazarus Lake is a computer construct. I don't think it's an exciting story. Everyone's always interested, but it tells you how not exciting it is that still no one knows. Basically, it was distrust of email when email started out. That, your first email was your title at work or your name and your title at work. And it was a work email. And you wrote work emails to the people who were willing to use emails at work. It's not the ones who said, but time went on and people started using email outside of work. And I'm sure pretty much everybody's first email, at least in my age group, it was their work email. And you go along and you sit down one day and you open your email at work and think, there's a lot too many personal emails in here.
Right.
And I need an email account. Then when you make your own email account, you're a lot more concerned about where does this shit go anyway? You hit boom, you hit the key and it's out in the air. It seems like it would be easy to intercept. So I didn't want to put my name on it because by today's standards, I guess, I'm not unstable, but I was trustful and stuck Lazarus Lake on there. And then the first social media came along later, which was the email list. And I just started writing stuff to the email list. I know you weren't supposed to use fake names to join the email list, but they let that one slide because it was what I had. And I wasn't pretending that I was someone else.
Right. Did you write every single month? And what was going on in you? What were you writing about? Were you racing that much? Were you already thinking about more races that you would create and organize?
There was only 10 issues a year, so it wasn't every month. But I felt so fortunate to get a free magazine and didn't want to have to give up some other publication to get that one. And I just wrote whatever issue came to mind. There's always issues with running.
Sure.
I don't know. I've got a pile of things I'd like to write for the magazine, and I just can't seem to escape with enough time to get it out of my head and into bits and bytes on the computer.
Yeah.
Because the backyard thing has gone completely out of control.
Yeah, let's talk about that specifically. There are people here running, maybe you are not ultra runners and everything, but coming up, basically, as soon as we publish this in a couple weeks, is the Backyard Ultra for this year. And how did that come?
We came to the farm in 2010 that we moved out here, and I was already making trails before that we even built the house. I wanted to have a race on my trails, but it's only 150 acres, so it's not a really big space. It's a modest size yard, and we're just a family, so we didn't have huge resources. So I was thinking of a race that we could put on with the limited space and limited resources that would be fun. And we did the backyard, and I thought, I hope that enough people enjoy this that we can keep putting on this race every year. Yeah, right now there's 500 and something backyards that are affiliated with ours in 80 something countries. We're coming up, we're having the team championships, and there's teams from 63 countries entered. Next year, the winners will meet here on the every other year, the World Individual Championship. The first one we ran, we thought, would it be possible to run 100 miles this way? And surely if you ran 100 miles this way, where that every hour you ran the exact same distance, that would surely be the hardest possible way to do 100. It's got a lot of people thinking about how we pace the long races and multi-days, because last year we had the every other year individual championship, and there were 47 people went 200 miles in under 48 hours. You don't have that much in multi-day running for years. had 8 people went over 400 miles in 4 days, 4 straight sub 24-hour hundreds.
Let's talk about this worldwide, the timing on the hour, their time zones. What did you have in mind for as it grew, and how did you help people figure out, make sure we're doing this right on their time zone, start time, end time, all that logistics? Was that something you had to deal with that people figured out themselves? How'd that work?
For the team championships,
Yeah.
the team championships are just, it's a response to the pandemic. We'd have a championship every year at Biggs, and the best runners would come. We've been since the beginning constantly trying to adapt to, as quick as you adapt your ability to process stuff to the size of the number of races there are, it doubles. You're lost again. But the pandemic had particular restrictions. No one could travel. And so we thought, well, you can't have bigs because no one can travel. But people were traveling to some extent. With most countries you could travel around within your country.
Right.
So the idea came, we could have a race in the dead. There was already about 30 or 35 countries that had backyards in 2020, and contacted the people that put them on there and said, we'll have a 15-man race. We'll hold them all simultaneously. And each of these races, it will be the team for your country. And we'll see which race can log the most yards between all the runners. Because that way the scoring, the 15th guy is just as important as the one. Then talked to Mike Dobies, and he put together the computer stuff with Google Sheets where that we could keep the score simultaneously. So other than people figuring out the damn time zones and the daylight savings time and the not daylight savings time and all the screwy ass stuff the government does with time, because it's unbelievable. After more than 100 years, they haven't figured out just to get rid of daylight savings time.
Yeah.
And it's only a nuisance. It has no benefit. Anyway, I'm passionate about wanting to get rid of daylight savings time.
Yeah. I think a lot of people agree with you on that.
If you deal with people in all 24 time zones on a daily basis, and you want to put together an event where that at some date in the future, you're going to start the teams in at least 22 or 23 of the 24 time zones, maybe all 24. You got to figure out they're all going to start at the same time. What is that? There's countries that are 30 minutes off. There's countries that are on daylight savings time, off daylight savings time. When the government finally acted on, say, daylight savings time, what they in their infinite wisdom did was change the time that it switched, so that now all the countries in the world are no longer in alignment. They took something that you would think was as fouled up as it could get and figured out a way to make it even worse.
You've had to think a lot about time. One thing we chatted about earlier is sleep and how much time you have in a day. And you're a special creature in that area too.
I don't know how common it is, but it's I've got the low sleep gene. There isn't any doubt. I sleep a lot more than I used to, because I probably average over 4 hours a night. And it used to be pretty consistently 3 or less. I think when you get old, you just sleep way too much.
Let's talk about your running through this. The first race you created, your own running, was there a shift in your identity? You've been a coach, you've been a race director. What are you best at of this stuff?
Eating. I can I eat really well. I'm
All right.
I can eat almost anything. My stomach tolerates everything. I greatly enjoy eating lots of different things. Through the backyard, I've gotten to do traveling I never imagined in overseas countries. You look for a restaurant that doesn't have an English translation on the menu. And then the only thing, you just pick something out to find out what it is. And the only thing you have to make certain of, and you can use sign language to get it across, is there some kind of meat. Don't want to order a meal with no meat, because if there's no meat, it's not a meal.
There you go. A monumental year. Maybe they're all monumental, but this year, a huge number of finishers. The first female finisher. How was 2024 for you? Not everything went well for you this year in all your goals, but let's talk about the Barkley, which may be the most well-known thing. There's a film. I want to talk about that and on all your thoughts. How did you feel? What was the film project idea? How did you feel about that getting made? Did that make an impact on the race and this year's great success?
The film was entirely the work of Tim and Annika. Yes, I think that a lot of the magic of the film was that they had no connection with running. And while that there are many good running films out, they're done by runners for runners. And they have a straight across appeal or a narrow range of appeal. These are two people who knew nothing about foot racing from 100 meters to name a distance. And so their perspective looking at it was, they made a film for everybody, and not just runners could enjoy it because of the topic, but other people that had nothing to do with running could enjoy it because I guess it's like they had the questions, or they would include stuff as information that a runner making a running movie wouldn't include, because everyone knows that.
Everything about the Barkley's jaw dropping to most people the first time they hear about it or get involved in it. I just love some of the features you have, the paperback book page retrieval. It's just a brilliant thing. Everybody's got to watch this movie a few times and enjoy it, whether they're involved in ultra running, whether they're involved in the sport at all. Again, you create this race with the vision of time and infinity is ahead. Over the years, are there a couple moments that stand out?
I
Surprise?
the Barkley, in particular, when there's a finisher, it stands out because you're there for the whole time. And I think you can have a concept in your mind that it's really terrible what they go through, but you have to be there and see the duration and the punishment. It's always a case you're watching people head out in those fourth and fifth laps, and you're thinking, if I was a responsible race director at a normal race, I would have pulled this person off the course and told them, you're through. And we just watched him head down the road, limping and hobbling, and thought, yeah, he's looking pretty good. Yeah, he's good.
Got a good shot.
He's got a good shot. But that's the Barkley. It's a little beyond. Last year's results were an anomaly in a lot of different things. The strength of the field, the unbelievable weather, the configuration of the course, the timing of when it started, and just every factor fell into place. People thought we'd be in a panic, but the race changes every year. It wasn't the kind of thing where you think, oh, we've got to take some action to stop this from happening again. We had 3 the year of the movie, and then wasn't very long after that, we went 3 or 4 years with no finishers. And prior to the movie, we'd gone several years without a finisher. Things just have to fall into place. The right people, the right time, the right conditions.
We're going to take a break here in the middle of the interview with Gary Cantrell, known as Lazarus Lake, creator of the Barkley, the Backyard, the Strolling Jim. By the way, if there's anybody you want to hear interviewed, let me know. You can go to the YouTube channel, leave comments, email me from the website, running70s.com, running70s.com. Let me know who you'd like to see interviewed.
I hope you enjoyed another episode of Running in the 70s. Voices, stories, and memories of athletes who were running in the 70s. Until next time, wherever you are, keep looking forward and don't forget to look back.